I'm just going to check, is my mic on, or do you have me back there? Cool. I was here a couple years ago and did a presentation. I did some work with Merrick at the downtown committee. How many of y'all have seen my presentation before? A couple people. Okay, so you guys can't shout out the answers as I move along. For everybody else, I'm going to move a little bit fast, but I'm going to go through a lot of information. You know, what I've kind of realized in a lot of our work is that what we do is we ask a different question about things. It's all data that's hiding in plain sight of what cities are and how they operate. So I'm going to go ahead and put my lessons up front on this one. I'm going to give you all about 5 seconds to tell me, and again, you guys can't shut out the answers. Tell me how many shapes you see in this kid's puzzle. Ready, go. Okay, you had 5 seconds. Tell me how many shapes you saw in that kid's puzzle. Louder, I can't hear you. 6, 17. Maybe you want to go higher than 18? I heard 18 over here. 20, okay. Overachiever. All right, well, how many kids were on the school bus? What time was it on the clock? So you all didn't see the 5 kids on the bus, or that it was 10 after 10 on the clock, because I didn't ask you that question. Daniel Kahneman is a behavioral psychologist who wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow. He won the Nobel Prize on behavioral economics, and it's all about the questions of how we behave. There's quirks that are buried inside of us as hairless apes in how we operate. I just took advantage of one of them. I gave you a question. You immediately filtered out all of the information that is there. You didn't see the kids, you didn't see the time because of the question that I posed you. When we think about public policy, when we think about cities, we have to come to grips with our biases and what we think is actually out there, the questions that we think are happening. What I'm doing, all of this work from here forward, is just asking a different question. There's no magic here. So I just want you to realize that. Don't overthink what a city is, all right? So I grew up in Rome. Rome, who's all been to Rome? Anybody? Oh, wow. It's a really wonderful place, isn't it? It's gotten so great. I mean, this is how they market themselves. It's, there it is. It's in the center of all the action. So we don't even have action that we can talk about. Hey, if you're in Albany, why not drive 2 hours in Rome, right? So Rome started the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal started and went east and west from Rome. Governor Clinton, this is him dumping a bucket of Lake Erie water into the Hudson Bay. What's kind of fascinating is somebody that grew up on the canal, and this is something for all folks in Syracuse you should ask about. This is the canal's path. It went east and west from Rome. There was a policy decision made by DeWitt Clinton to not send it the easiest path, which would be cutting it through Onondaga Lake right up into Lake Ontario. Does anybody know why he didn't do that easy path? It's because he hated Canada. Seriously. He didn't want Toronto to have any economics coming out of upstate New York. So look at that. Look at this path we carved through a country because of the spite about Canadians. Did that stop Canada? Did it stop Toronto from becoming a powerhouse? So why aren't we asking about this kind of stuff? And we have to realize that made Syracuse would have been fine without it, because it would have been the pivot point. It probably would actually have been what Buffalo became had we had a different geographical path, right? So this is my hometown. Back in the day, you know, we suffered the economic decline that a lot of upstate New York cities suffered. We lost all of our manufacturing when I was a kid, and we started throwing Hail Mary passes to save ourselves. One of the things that was kind of awesome is my hometown was actually created where the Battle of Fort Stanwix happened. You remember the pivotal Battle of Fort Stanwix from your Revolutionary War history? It wasn't all that pivotal, but it was where my town was settled. So when I was a kid, we lost all of this. It was all torn down, blown up, and we got this wooden fort. That's in the middle of my hometown. We occasionally get a Canadian tourist, and that's about it. You know, we get shuttled over there in grade school. We're pretty much the only people to go visit this thing, but my whole downtown was gone. Now, if that wasn't good enough, we decided to turn the rest of downtown into an urban renewal area. We built a pedestrian mall because, hey, it's the 70s, you need a pedestrian mall. And apparently 12 acres of open space isn't enough, so we put another 4 into a big urban plaza. A couple parking decks, because y'all are gonna drive over to, oh, by the way, I use y'all a lot. It's a very efficient word. I've been in the South a little too long now. But all the parking decks, because you all are gonna flood in to Rome to go visit our wooden fort. Oh, by the way, a new city hall, this parking deck is way too far away because people don't like to walk in the snow. This is 110 feet. So even though we have like a gerbil trail that people connect to the garage, they built a surface lot here. A new mall on the other side of Erie Canal Boulevard, or Erie Boulevard. And then this crazy thing like the Ponte Vecchio meets Le Corbusier, this thing called the Living Bridge that shot over the highway, this big concrete structure with shops in it. Now, as a kid, that was the first time I saw an escalator. And so my brothers and I would get on the escalator, ride up and ride down. None of us would shop there. And of the 230 businesses that got economic incentive grants in this urban renewal area to relocate into the bridge or the mall, of the 230 businesses that got checks, 18 of them relocated into that area. The other 200 and some odd businesses said thank you for the money and they moved to Florida. That's what I grew up with. I thought that was normal. This is my hometown. Now, I used to go to this church and just stare at the ceiling. I fell in love with architecture. I applied for architecture school and thought, well, I could put up with upstate New York winters, or I could go to the beach down here. And that was my choice of going to architecture school. And I didn't realize that when you go to an architecture program, you're essentially locked into prison for 5 years. You don't leave a room. But while I was there, these were a couple of my professors, and they were toying with this idea of the built environment, getting into planning from an architectural perspective. Just looking at the landscape and saying, why are we building this crap? You know, this cartoon of a landscape that is essentially a real place. This is San Antonio. So how did this happen? Why are these decisions being made when the world is showing us all these visual indicators that this is wrong? So while I was in architecture school, I went to another Rome. This is Rome, Italy. This is where my apartment was. This is where I went to school. And this is where I ate. And I started wrestling with this idea of, I've got two Romes in my life. I've got my Rome of my hometown that's dead after 200 years, and this Rome has been going on for thousands of years. How has this Rome survived and my Rome killed itself? What's up with that? And the simple theory behind it is cities are all places in time and have DNA. They have a trajectory of how they're growing. For tens of thousands of years, we've built these things called cities as a collection of hairless apes. This is our economic engine. This is what makes us efficient, right? Putting a lot of stuff in a small amount of space and not wasting that real estate and leveraging our communal investments into making a place that we live in, right? So let me use DNA as a different example. This is how I started my life when I had hair, right? And I was 3 months old. I was an angry little baby. And this is where I go, right? This is my trajectory. I'm going to be Papa whether I like it or not. There's not a lot I can do to change that path. Or more importantly, there's this path. There's my dad. So I'm genetically Italian. You see that from my last name. You see how I behave, right? That's who I am. But we also have a genetic predisposition to heart disease in my family. My father has had a 7 bypass heart surgery. Like, what do you call that, a septuple? Now, every Minicozy male in my family has had heart issues. I can just keep on growing, and I could eat hamburgers and cheeseburgers. I had some meatballs last night, because I'm in upstate New York, I have to do it. But I have to eat salad today. I know that I have to balance this stuff out. So what is Syracuse doing to think itself through in the future? Who is your grandfather? Who is your grandmother? What does Syracuse want to be when it grows up? You've already suffered some heart attacks. Who are you looking at? Do you have any of these models in your head? You're not just flying blind making a city. There are paths of lots of cities before you. Learn from it. So Asheville, opposite end of the spectrum, Asheville saved all of its downtown by a fluke. So who's been to Asheville? Anyone? A couple of folks. Asheville's up in the mountains, western North Carolina. Beautiful setting. We have the Blue Ridge Parkway, Smoky Mountains, all of that stuff. The other part of Appalachia that starts at the Adirondacks or up in Maine and kind of works its way through. So very similar kind of environment. Bluegrass music's from down there, beer. We're 83,000 people. We have 40 breweries. 40. We drink a lot of beer. And like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. It's your typical little place, right? Now, Asheville has become this hot thing, but it didn't start that way. We killed our downtown in the 80s with the adoption of a mall outside of the city. That's a 1996 Chevy Celebrity right there. That's not too long ago. But different from Rome, they didn't knock everything down. They were too poor to do that. They didn't have access to urban renewal money because we had a bad bond rating. So these are shots of downtown Asheville from not too long ago. Just boarded up buildings, just sitting there fallow until the city took a different tact on how they were going to invest in themselves. But like a Greek choir, anytime somebody tried to fix downtown, this is what the community would say. We're not city people. We're not New Orleans. We're mountain people. We're rural people. That's who we are. You know, this is America. We need to spread out. We don't need to have neighbors. You can't make me live downtown. You know, every community I go to, we have these people that say that, and that's cool. But what does it cost to spread yourselves out? So Julian Price inherited a bunch of money. He's from Greensboro. He was living in Seattle at the time, and his family's like, please come back to Greensboro, and he stopped in Asheville, and he put his inheritance down. And he created a for-profit real estate development company. This is a company that I was working with before we created Urban 3. Public interest projects take 75% of its money and puts it into sticks and bricks. We fix buildings. And then we reserve 25% to seed businesses, like a nightclub. You know, we're mostly about making housing happen downtown, but you need stuff for people to do. So we find entrepreneurs to do a nightclub. The first vegetarian restaurant, these guys had a lunch counter at the YMCA, made good vegetarian food. They went to the bank. The bank took one look at their menu, and they're like, where's your pork? This is North Carolina. It's a pork state, son. You know, nobody's going to eat these vegetables. And so they couldn't get money at the bank, so we put money behind them because their food was good. Asheville is now one of the top 10 vegetarian cities in the entire country. That started from nothing. But it's about thinking through what a city is. It's about understanding your population and looking at other cities. We actually stole that from Ithaca. You know, Ithaca had a vegetarian restaurant before we did. So this is one of our buildings before and after. All that was sitting there. We just made the opportunity happen. We've done other things. This is a three-way public-private partnership. This is a public parking garage. We brought a hotel in, and we're doing housing on the backside. This is the three-dimensional model of the legal agreement to get the community to understand the opportunity here. So this is the city owns fee simple here, and we're going to shroud this whole thing with taxes. So yeah, go ahead and do your parking deck, but we're going to put taxes around this thing. We're going to grow more wealth for our community and meet other needs. So all right, well, that's great. What we saw was going on in our community was this really weird argument about how people think cities are. It's like this religious experience about what cities really are without looking at the data. Here's what's going on with our city. This is the value of our downtown as an asset. So we're a $15 million investor inside a $100 million asset. But just by fixing up those upper stories, this is what happened to the value of my city. So it grew from $100 million to $500 million. All of that wealth was sitting there. It was just boarded up, right? To show you that it's not all love and roses in Asheville, in any community you go to, there's people with perceptions, opinions, what they think things operate. So these are my favorite campaign ads from Chris Peterson. And so this is from the 90s. Look at this poor guy, he's crying, right? Just shackled by council decisions for doing streetscape projects and parking garages downtown. That damn city, $26 million. Downtown development for bureaucrats instead of water, sewers, and streets for our citizens. Downtown parking fiasco, millions of dollars wasted on unused decks. Well, downtown was empty. Now it's like you can't find a parking space. But let's take a step back. $26 million. Who's got $26 million in your pocket? Anybody? It's a lot of money. All right, let's do some math. If you invest $26 million on a $100 million asset, and that asset grows to $500 million, is your investment of 26 and harvesting $400 million, is that a good return on investment? Why the hell do we listen to Chris? So in the political realm, I mean, Chris has amped up his game. He's gone full internet now with like fire and brimstone, and he misspells charlatans. But, you know, it's like this is what the political realm has become, these attitudes and opinions, this kind of threats and intimidation without facts and data. Just put the numbers out there. Let's be reasonable adults and figure out if it's good for all of us, right? So if we just bring the data into the conversation, we can have a better conversation about what we're all doing here. Start there, then bring the politics into the conversation. You know, but you have to start somewhere with the data. Now this actually goes back to, I've got this kid's book from that I found in a garage sale. I've been carrying it around with me forever, and I finally decided to read it. This is a teacher's guide. The city, the town, and the country. The city, the town, and the country, right? So here it is, third grade, 1959. 1959, we were teaching this in third grade. So kindergarten, we learned about our house. First grade, the school. Second grade, the neighborhood. Third grade, you learn about regional planning. Third grade. Like, y'all need this in Maxwell. Like, this needs to be like one of your books. So here's a class. Here's like a session. This is what's going on. So there's a new factory gets built. Even more kids go to school. So you see what's going on here. Now it's the 50s. It's painfully white. I'll say that. It's also somewhat misogynistic. The girls are shoved in the hallway because there's overcrowding, right? Girls don't need an education. But in blue, you can't read this, but it says in blue here, it says, give 4 good reasons for building a new school. So you ask your third graders about community infrastructure, that there should be parity, everybody should have a desk, equalize the community infrastructure, right? We should all have a desk. Third graders. You read on about Mr. Canfield. He didn't want a new school. He says our taxes are too high now. If we build a new school, we'll need more teachers and everything else it takes to run a school. Then we'll have to pay higher taxes. So somebody's upset about building a school. So you ask your third graders, why would some people have to pay higher taxes if a new school were built? Why are some people against paying higher taxes? And you learn that in a community, there's going to be people that just are going to resist that investment or not see it as a worthwhile venture. That's fair. But what does a community need? Third grade. I love this. While patterns vary from state to state, counties are usually responsible for education, library, health, welfare, agriculture. In studying the functions performed by your county, you will no doubt find there's a duplication of services and overlapping of jurisdictions and a lack of coordination between your county and the local communities within it. Did y'all see that with Onondaga County and the city of Syracuse? This is 1959, folks. Have we not learned anything? But my favorite part is this. Remember, too, that many children, whether urban and rural and regardless of region, are tragically limited in their knowledge of the world. What we have to focus on is this tragic limitation. What people see of the city is they see where they live, where they drop their kids off at school, where they get their groceries, and where they go to work. Any disturbance in that is a problem for the mayor to solve. And I need a parking space. I can't park in front of my building. So all of a sudden, it's the community's problem to solve my pattern of living. And this is what the political realm has become. We don't see this thing in totality as an economic engine. We see it for our tragic limitation, and that's what steers the conversation. So what we find is if you try to expand the conversation, let's get past this. Why are we all in this together? And we need to look no further than the dictionary. This is the Oxford Dictionary. Incorporate, to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. There's very little difference between our real estate development corporation and the city of Asheville. My city has a finite boundary of land that has to be managed. We elect a board of directors to run the city of Asheville, but it's still got a corporate value. It's got a charter. It's chartered by the state. Our county is as well. So we're an investor in 2 corporations. My city of Asheville is a finite boundary of land. It's a crop. It's like a big farm. When a farmer looks at real estate, the farmer doesn't just start like you're in agriculture. You don't just, let's just get a bunch of goats and see what happens. No, you're figuring out what the market value is of, although that's probably how you started. It's, you figure out what the market value is of that cheese and where it performs in the marketplace. You're doing some math on that. So my city at $12.8 billion, my mayor is 6 times the value of Ted Turner. Does Ted Turner just throw darts about what he wants for his businesses, or is he looking at the market performance of CNN and what the ad space is? He's doing math. So if my mayor is 6 times the potency of him, shouldn't she be doing the same thing? Shouldn't she be looking this through? So if we look at land like a farmer looks at a crop, we'll see a whole different reality. Again, asking a different question. Here's our building. So this is what it used to look like. This is the streetscape project that Chris got pissed off about. So a garbage can, a bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree. Thank you, city, for that subsidy in front of our front door, because we didn't pay for that. America, you do this. There's like, these projects in downtown are expensive. And people get all wound up. They're like, that's $1 million. It's like, well, yeah, but what's the return on investment? So we've got about $20,000 of physical stuff here. We took it from $300,000 of value to $11 million of value. What that represents is the taxes paid on that property just shot up 3,500%. It's not money we get, it's money y'all get. That's taxes, right? Do y'all have a 401k plan that grows by 3,500%? Like, wouldn't you like that? Isn't that a good return? So retail, office, residential. And people are like, well, Joe, that's not fair. That's $11 million. We've got this Walmart over here at $20 million. Incredibly potent from a total value perspective. Well, it's $20 million, but it took 34 acres of my corporation to create that. That Walmart pays $220,000 in property taxes. Anybody in here pay $220,000 in property taxes? This is my house. We pay $2,000 in taxes, but we're on 1/10 of an acre. Oh, those are my dogs, by the way. They think they're lions. But we do that to freak our neighbors out. But if we had a 1-acre cookie cutter that fell into my neighborhood, it's going to grab 10 houses, each of them paying $2,000 or about $20,000 an acre. You follow me? If you take that 1-acre cookie cutter, fly it in space, divide Walmart's tax bill by the 34 acres it's sitting on, this is what its per acre yield is. So which would you rather have? Now this is an acre of our building. I was presenting this in Colorado, and I was like, let me just make it real simple for you folks in Colorado. If you had an acre of land to grow something in Colorado, what are you going to grow? And they got the joke. Cash crops, right? And some people are like, well, Joe, that's not fair. We take the losses in property taxes to take the gains in retail taxes. All right, let's get rid of me because I don't sell anything. Now, the misnomer is we focus on $77 million worth of transactions. Those are already happening in the marketplace before Walmart shows up. So it's not like they created it. You know, it's not like you didn't have the access to toilet paper before Walmart showed up. You know, it's just shifted to that. But let's just go ahead and just assume that Walmart made $77 million worth of transactions. Well, the city just gets a portion of that. So it's 27% of this 8-cent sales tax. This is what comes back to the city, which is more potent than the property taxes, but the total gain is $51,000. This is your total income. That's just our property taxes to the city. Now we sell stuff, so let's add that. Now you're cooking with gas. Which would you rather have? Jobs? We can measure that too. Who's more potent in jobs? So when you stack it up side by side, we even have 90 units of residential per acre versus their 0. Again, the lessons of generations of cities. You can fit more stuff and make more money on less space, and this is a pattern that we've somehow had amnesia over. There's the numbers, folks. Now, I don't have a finance degree. I'm not a CPA. I like to draw pictures. This is really simple stuff. This is 5th grade division. It's not complex math that I'm doing here. It's just dividing land into the numbers and using that as productivity. Now, some people are like, dude, what's your problem with Walmart? Why do you hate Walmart? I go to a lot of weird conferences. One of the conferences that I presented at was the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers, the trade organization of assessors. Is there an assessor in the room? Have y'all ever hung out with assessors? They're not the most dynamic people on the planet. And cool people, but they're like math nerds. They're all in bed by like 5 o'clock. It makes a planning conference look like Burning Man by comparison. But this guy presented at 8 in the morning one morning. He's up there presenting. He's like, this is how cheap our buildings are. Our buildings are so cheap. And he's going into all these numbers about how cheap his buildings are. I'm in the back of the room watching this. There's 2,000 assessors. And I'm like, wow, this is brilliant. He's getting all of his tax bills lowered in one meeting, right? I'll make it real simple. When you tax on value, there's a perverse incentive to build junk in your community, period. And what he's doing is he's like, look at how crappy our buildings are. He's dropping his tax bills. Now, the citizen inside me is having a coronary because I'm like, wow, he's basically not going to pay for his services that he's consuming. The average Walmart consumes all of its property tax with just the police services to that Walmart. So what you think you're getting for your schools, whatever, economic development, you're not getting anything. They're smart people. They figured it out. So I went up to the microphone and I asked Mr. Terrell, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he goes, 15 years. We'll be out of that building in 15 years. We designed that building to depreciate as quick as possible because we're more into the distribution system. And we want to get into a new building, start the depreciation cycle, and go again. From the mouth of babes. That's the way the cities run. That's the economics of what's happening out there. And you're in control of that. So that's all I ask of you is make sure that you realize that the average household cat lasts as long as a Walmart. It's your portfolio. Is that what you want as an investment? Do the math on it. So we've done this all across the country now. We've done it in like, 21 different states. When you stack up the data, when you mush it all together, for every $1 of county taxes to the county, somebody's paying living out in the county. Their brother or sister living in the city is paying 5 times to that same county. This isn't the city tax, folks. This is the county tax. This is the Walmart. Here's the mall. And as soon as you stack a building up, this could be in downtown Skaneateles or downtown Syracuse or Sonoma. It doesn't matter. As soon as you start stacking stories, you're stacking those dollar bills. And what's crazy is it's not a proportional growth, it's an exponential growth from 2 to 3 to 6 stories. You know, I've had somebody tell me in Longmont, Colorado, they're like, we don't want 6-story buildings, we can't see the mountains. I'm like, step 50 feet to the right, for God's sakes. You know, it's like, what's up with that? Did your forefathers, when they created Syracuse, they're like, we need to see the mountains? No, they made a city. So, okay, this is data. I can use technology to show you things. I can show you what's going on inside your brain. I can show you your brainstem activity versus your creative thought process in your brain. I can map that. Can we do the same thing with the city? So we'll take the city, and this is the way that people typically look at my county. So this is Buncombe County. Incidentally, if you want to have some fun, you ever hear the term, you don't know bunk? That came from my county. We have some really incredible conversations. But anyway, so this is a big park here. This is part of the Blue Ridge Parkway, so it's non-taxable, so we grade it out, not worth anything. Just going to be crude about it. That park ain't paying taxes. So let's be rough about it. Here's the Biltmore Estate. This property is worth $100 million. It's the most valuable property. It's the hottest color. Green is low value, purple is hot value. When Bill Cecil shows up at one of our council meetings, we all genuflect and thank him for his time because he's got a $100 million house. But that's not fair because he's also got the biggest gas tank. So it's not miles per tank, it should be miles per gallon. That's how you measure efficiency and productivity of cars, right? He's got 2,000 acres, he's got a 150,000 square foot house. Of course it's going to be worth a lot of money. But rather than total value, let's do value per acre. Now the map changes. Here it is in 3D. Does anybody want to take a wild guess where downtown Asheville is? Take one guess. Boom, right? Now this is 10 miles away. That's our little sister Black Mountain. That's a little village out there. You can see its main street popping up the same way that our main street does. Now we can make a better decision about what's going on with our economics in our community. How do you reward more wealth? How are you more productive, right? So Merrick asked us to come up here and try it on Syracuse. By the way, that's Patino, by the way, for the basketball fans. He was part of Boeheim's team. But here's Onondaga County, and you can see the spikes in downtown, and you can this spike right here is by the hospital. So see how these things are like field goal posts, and then it just sinks in the center? That's because of 81 cutting through the center there. Now what's kind of neat is, look at the crust of value around Skaneateles Lake right here. So, you know, this makes sense. Somebody buys a house on the side of a lake, it's going to be worth some money, right? It's next to an amenity. But look at the village of Skaneateles and what it's doing. Now ask yourself the question, what the hell did you do to Onondaga where you've blown out all the value around the side of it and you didn't get the value that they happen here? So this is the latent effect of poisoning a lake, right? This is what now you're dealing with because of generations of how you've treated that amenity. Again, learn from it, make different decisions, and move on. Zooming into the city, we can start to see this, sorry Syracuse, but this massive cavity of non-taxable real estate right here in the university, in the hospital. You also see the same thing on the other side of the highway. But you clearly see the path of 81 cutting through here and basically hollowing out the city. That's an effect of that highway, that you're getting red value versus purple over closer to Armory Square. So where you have that context, where you have that stuff that feels like a downtown, you're getting so much more power out of it from a value perspective. These are your jobs. Downtown is more productive on a jobs per acre, per square mile, per whatever, versus the Hill. But the Hill's doing quite well compared to other areas. This is can't really see, it's a little dark here, but this is, you can see the field goal post right here, and then you see where 81 comes through in the center here. Now again, yes, there's going to be issues if you take 81 out with the region. It's going to be more difficult for people from further afield to just breeze through Syracuse. Well, what's the trade-off? You know, can you get more wealth out of your community and harvest more wealth for the good of everybody? And you know what? Sorry, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. You're going to take 5 minutes more time to go from Clay to Oneonta or to Ithaca or whatever. You know, but why should you carry that burden? Is Syracuse a heart or a kidney? Are you just passing things through? So 23 acre, sorry. I hope I'm not too pointed. I mean, it's a different crowd than over across the highway. But This is the Armory Square project, which is a pilot. It's already in a tax deferment situation, but even with that, even under a pilot, 23 acres of this would be as productive as a 60-acre shopping town mall. So even with that tax suppression, it's much more potent. 8 acres of this guy. And this building was built in the 1800s. 8 acres of that would equal the 60-acre this. So think of the generations of wealth that this has produced for you because of your great-grandparents' decision to put this here. This is how you make longevity of wealth. More nerdy numbers. This is the footprint of Syracuse. This is its property tax productivity of the entire county. So it takes up 2.7% of the entire county's land area. It's producing 16% of the county's property taxes. And it's doing that even though it's shouldering the burden of the most percent exempt land area. You've got the university, the hospital, all the public buildings, federal buildings, state buildings, county buildings, Lemoyne College. All that stuff is non-taxable. So even with it, Syracuse is carrying that burden. Oh, public housing, that's another one. So with that shouldering of the burden for the needs of the entire community, it's also more productive. Syracuse has awesome data, so we decided to nerd out on it. This is just looking at like a series of x-rays of just the building footprints in black, public or the nature space in green. But what cities are is essentially roads, buildings, and parking, right? That's what functions, how you drive between properties, and that's your infrastructure, and then the buildings pay the taxes. So we'll just turn on those x-rays. Now you can start to see some of the stuff that happened in your community. Let's just look at the buildings. This is just your building footprints. I mean, look at the damage caused to the old fabric in here. You can imagine how much this was knitted together as a fabric, and you eliminated those buildings. You eliminated that tax base by doing that and essentially transferred it further afield into outlying towns. That was wealth that you had. This is the cancer that happens when you bring the highways into it. These are all the surface parking lots. Now, to give you an idea, a building is about, let's say, $40 a square foot of value. A parking lot's about $1.50 a square foot of value. So a building is going to be 40 times more potent than a parking lot. We tend to think of subsidies as I come into a public meeting, Mayor Minor gives me like some density bonus or tax subsidy or a pilot, and I go walking out the door after you all yelled at me about what a scumbag developer I am, and I get my bonus, right? But how you create your tax system bakes in subsidies into it. Put simply, the less I use your land, the less taxes I pay. So if I put a surface parking lot in, that value of that surface parking lot's almost nothing. This is at the same scale, downtown Syracuse, next to Destiny Mall. This is kind of amazing. So y'all remember, like, okay, you score the Rockstar parking spot, like right here, and you walk into the center of the mall. That's the same distance of walking from the Armory, like 3 blocks away. Do you all, like, when you park 3 blocks away from Armory Square, do you like go, yes, I got a great parking spot? Or are you complaining because you're not parking right in the circle? And there's a cost to that. Here's the value of downtown Syracuse on a per acre basis. $2.8 million of value per acre. Destiny Mall is $360,000. So downtown Syracuse is actually 780% more potent than Destiny Mall on a property tax standpoint, as a crop versus crop. Jobs. Downtown Syracuse is producing 320% more jobs than Destiny Mall. And retail taxes. Downtown Syracuse is 235% more productive in retail taxes than Destiny Mall. Would you guys think that before you came into this meeting today? That's the data. So there's political issues that you all have. You're not alone. This is a map of political boundaries and how it affects things in the Northeast. You're much more fractured than the rest of the country, but it is what you are. You're not alone. We did analysis of Buffalo. This is Erie County in Buffalo. You can see Buffalo right here. Buffalo damaged themselves a hell of a lot worse than what you guys did, but they bombed out this whole area over here. Oh, incidentally, National Grid, Erie County does this really weird thing where they tax the snot out of National Grid. So all of their little utility stations are these little purple pixie sticks that pop up. So you all get to pay that, because don't you think National Grid's just going to take their tax bill and kick it back out to the producer or the consumer? Of course. So this shows you the path of destruction. Downtown Buffalo is still actually doing all right, but this is what happened with urban renewal. Let's kind of fly through this. This is the urban renewal project where they just leveled an entire village and made that, so the values can measure it with that. The history of urban renewal in upstate New York is pretty awful. But 0.7 acres of that thing in Niagara Falls would equal the entire 102-acre Eastern Hills Mall. 4.7 acres of that. Now that's not too difficult to make. That's a 3-story building. 4.7 acres of that would equal the 102-acre mall. Am I moving too fast? Y'all follow me with this? I mean, the stuff is hiding in plain sight. Downtown Buffalo has 27 football fields of surface parking. It's a real big problem there. So retail sales. This is the property tax model of of Erie County. Downtown Buffalo is winning. And here's the retail model, and downtown Buffalo is winning. This is the mall section over in Amherst, which pops up, but not nearly what downtown is. So we did this, we see this in other places. This is Austin, Texas. This is downtown, this is the mall zone, and here's Syracuse. When we did Syracuse, America's, I can't remember his name, he was the chairman of your board. He said to me in a meeting, he's like, that's not true, there's no way. There's no way Destiny is that low and downtown is here. And he goes, my daughter shops at the mall. She drops $200 a month. Sorry, I use this story everywhere I go now. And I'm like, all right, so your daughter shops at the mall, $200 a month. How often is she there? And he's like, every weekend. I said, 8 times a month? And he was like, yeah. I said, you had lunch downtown today, didn't you? And he said, yeah. I said, how much did you spend? He's like, $12. I said, multiply that times 20. He's like, oh my God, I spend more than my daughter. You know, there are these biases and heuristics that we have of the way that we think the world operates, but then there's the reality of the math that's there. That's it. This is downtown Syracuse the way that it is right now, killing Destiny Mall at a productivity level. Here's Nashville. We see this all over the place. Check your biases to the curb, do some math, and see what's happening. Durango, Colorado, same deal. Here's their downtown. This is the mall zone. Here's their retail. So we just went ahead and took the next level further. This is called an area graph, looking at the retail taxes through time. You see what's happening with the recession. Colorado cities operate monolithically off retail tax, much more so than New York cities do. But here's downtown, and here's South Durango. So downtown was less than South Durango, about 86% of where the mall area was. After the recession, downtown caught up and is now about 91% of South Durango. So we asked the next question. We're like, maybe it's all these infill buildings that downtown's doing. They're adding more buildings, so surely that's what's giving them more wealth. So we measured it. So this is what downtown Durango added in new buildings. That's what South Durango added. So pound for pound, dollar for dollar, they only did 17,000 square feet of new buildings, and you caught up to something that was adding almost 300,000 square feet of new buildings. We took the next step in. A couple businesses opened their books for us. So this is Tim Callahan and Peter Shaler, bookstore and a coffee shop, 1-story retail on Main Street, 1-story retail. This is the footprint consumption of Walmart versus those things. When you look at the productivity, this is the property taxes paid to the county out of those 2 businesses versus Walmart. This is the retail taxes produced out of those 2 buildings versus Walmart per acre. Jobs. So with these small businesses, they don't have the advocacy group. They can't go lobby to get their fair claim inside the tax system because they're busy. But let me ask you all this as people that are inside the corporation with these groups of businesses. Who's hiring the local accountant? This side of the ledger or that side of the ledger? Who's hiring the local attorney? Who's sponsoring a Little League team? Who's taking part of being on your board in the downtown committee? Who's involved in the community, this side or this side? What we're witnessing with the American city is we're flying blind without understanding our own economics, and we're being harvested. I don't fault Walmart for doing this. Just understand how they're doing it and learn from it. This is your community. So here's Buffalo compared to Syracuse, and there's your spike, there's their spike. This is Manhattan. We have to put them side by side so you can really feel it. Now, mind you, this is Harlem over here. So we kind of rubbed it in on Buffalo a little bit. Buffalo's got Elmwood is pretty much the only thing that's really kind of doing all right. So you might be wondering, well, Joe, that's fine. This is all the production, but surely there's a cost side to this. This actually goes back to the 60s. In 1973, the Nixon administration published this document, The Cost of Sprawl. Do you all learn about this in the Maxwell School? 1973, the federal government stepped in and said, okay, you all need to understand the numbers, and they ran it for us. So we did the same thing in Lafayette. Lafayette, Louisiana was kind of awesome. Their mayor is a strong mayor. He's a business owner. He owns a dog food supply store. And he's like, Joe, we're going broke. People don't understand how broke we are. So they hired us to run the revenues and the cost. And we're like, all right, well, we found out in their documents they actually got broke once before. This is the cover of their budget document from 1994. Do you think their finance officer was sending a message about the state of affairs for the government? So this is the government about to get hit by a tsunami and eaten by a shark. Now, what do you think the elected officials did when faced with this information? Kicked the can down the road. The next year, undeterred, the finance officer was like, hey, did I mention how screwed we are? And the third year, they did this joint city-county government. And so we asked them, you know, the citizens of the city didn't want to see the county go broke, so they just kind of hopped in and combined services. So I asked them, I'm like, what did you do to change your behavior in the last 20 years to keep yourself out of bankruptcy? Or did you just fire the artist from the first 2 years and go to clip art? Like, what did you do? Here's their productivity model. And this is retail plus property taxes combined. Here's downtown. Here's some new urbanism stuff, and they generally spread in these directions. Just taking pavement, cities own streets. You own them. When I build them and give them to you as a developer, you own them in perpetuity. You have to fix them. All of these streets combined is 6.5 square miles of asphalt that has to be replaced every 40 years. It'll span from Long Island to Manhattan to New Jersey, fill all of New York Harbor. They have to replace that every 40 years, or it's 12 times the size of the French Quarter. That's expensive. So 13% of it were these things. But we call them publicly funded driveways, dead ends, or cul-de-sacs. I mean, this guy parks his trailer there. And they're like, well, people don't want to have traffic. And I'm like, well, that's not a street. Why is the public paying for that? That's 13% of that asset. I want to be 6 foot tall and have a full head of hair. I think you guys should give that to me. It'd make me happy. Like, what kind of bullshit is that where it's got to be about happiness? What can you afford? So, sorry about that. But this is the city. This is the county. There's 67% more surface area in the city versus the county, yet this is how it's financed. So I'm no math genius, but shouldn't these two pie charts match? Well, that pissed off one of the counselors, and he had this to say to me. It's not about where you live, it's what you believe. The public works director responded by saying this: there's no such thing as an infrastructure fairy. And so we had to Photoshop Kevin in on that one. And Kevin's like, could you just show it to them as a cash flow model? We're like, sure. So in 1960, and this is 2015, so we stopped the music in 2015. Here's where you are financially. In 1960, a developer gives you roads. When you get that road, like when we put an air conditioner on one of our buildings, we set up a reserve account to replace that air conditioner 15, 20 years out when we get the useful life on that thing, right? So part of your rent pays for that savings account that we eventually harvest for new. We just can't reach in our pocket and find money, right? So when you got that road from the developer, you should have set aside, because this is the cost of that road in 2010, that's what you should have set aside, that teeny little piece. And every year thereafter, you should have set more aside because you took on more roads and you put yourself further into debt. This is your revenue. This is how you're going to cash flow. So for the people getting a public administration degree, let me ask you a really simple problem. Do you see enough revenue to pay for the expenses? Let me make it easier for you. Do you see enough revenue to pay for the expenses? Little sidebar here. The reason why cities don't, going off script here, the reason why cities don't do this, they have this thing called CAFR standards. And we sat down with the finance officer and we're like, why aren't you doing this for your roads? And she goes, well, our CAFR standards put them in an asset ledger. When developers give us the roads, they're an asset. And we're like, well, you have to pay for them. And she goes, well, certainly, but our CAFR standards. We're like, we don't care about your CAFR standards. And I held up my computer, and I'm like, this computer depreciates, right? But I can sell it to you. And she goes, yeah. I said, that's an asset. Can you pick your roads up, and can you sell them in Baton Rouge? And she goes, well, no. I'm like, that's a liability. And she goes, well, our CAFR standards. We're like, we're not playing by your CAFR standards. This is what happens inside government. When you go off and administer things, you're going to have a finance office department that's going to be following rules that make sense, but not in totality of how a government runs. And you're essentially going to be going broke watching the numbers get whittled away. So that's little, just so you know what's going on out there. Now what's scary is, so if obviously they don't have enough revenue to pay for the debt, so because it's 18 times the scale, they've already started taking loans out to pay for roads. So this is the debt service on the bonds that gets garnished off the tops of their revenue that they don't even see. That goes straight to New York City. So in the model, we sent everybody a bill. This is a side view of the city. We sent everybody a bill for where they live and then what they pay in taxes in green. Now, like any business, you net the negative, the expenses against the revenues, the positive, what's in the black, what's in the red. Here's the whole thing in 3D. It looks like the parish is bleeding. They call their counties parishes down there. If you take this thing and slap it on the floor, this is what it looks like. So you can see the costs of these areas. And they told us, they said, Joe, people want to live out here in the swamp. It's expensive to drain a swamp. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'd love to live out there too. I mean, look what you're paying them to move out there. Is that a free market if you're covering the costs of all of those expenses? So make it simple. In 1950, they had 34,000 people, 5 feet of pipe per person, 2.4 fire hydrants per 1,000 people. They've grown their population to 121,000 people, which is good. They've grown their feet of pipe per person to this, and their fire hydrants per 1,000 to this. So they've grown their population 350%. They've grown their liability 1,000 and 2,000%. And they told us, they're like, look, Joe, we got rich. We got gas money out of the Gulf. I'm like, all right, we can measure that too. Your wealth went from, adjusted for today's dollars, $28,000 a household to $45,000. So your wealth has only grown by 160%. Yet your liability's grown 1,000 and 2,000%. That's like me getting a raise for $1,000 a year and convincing my wife into building a 60,000 square foot addition on my house. It doesn't make any sense. And they're not alone. This is an American paradigm of how we've been operating for the last 50 years, just kicking the can down the road and thinking this is how we operate. I'll give you one last example. South Bend, Indiana, just measuring their pipes. This is their population growth. Their apex year was 1963, and that's when they lost Studebaker and Packard to Detroit. Their population dropped and they flatlined. Does that feel familiar, upstate New York? You know, they got no more people. Here's their pipe growth since the 1800s. When they're building a city, I'll draw a boundary when their population stops in 1960. This is adding infrastructure into their community. So right about there is when their population stops. Now, they're not feeling the cost of those pipes because those costs of those pipes are a 50-year problem. You're not going to experience it until your great-grandkids start to run the city, because that's when the liability comes due for rehab. You know, you experience this with the downtown. Trying to get a pipe fixed in downtown, it's like all of a sudden you have to find money. It's like, well, what happened to the money we've been paying for the last 100 years in our downtown? So this is their pipe growth indexed against their population growth. I mean, were you dying in the streets in 1930 of thirst that you needed so much more infrastructure? Like, what's up with that? Stretched end to end, it'll go from South Bend, Indiana to my office in North Carolina. They own that. They have to fix it. So just to close, all of this information that I'm showing you is hiding in plain sight. This is all stuff that we have inside every office of government. Why aren't we looking at Canada for solutions? Are these people like Martians or something? Like, how is it that their city, seriously, get in a bus and go drive to Hamilton, Ontario. It's just like the rest of upstate New York, but they're not nearly as bankrupt as we are. They have the same economy, same manufacturing, and you see that their cities are much more contained and much more fiscally resilient. You know, and what we found is they're paying the exact same taxes we pay on this side of the border. They're not paying any more taxes. Just to quote Chief Justice Brandeis, these are the relentless rules of humble arithmetic. If you just do the math on this stuff, it'll show you what's going on. I'm a little over, so let me just jump to the end here. You know, analyze public policy, know what's going on, and don't accept policy as something that's got to be there forever. This is all stuff that's affecting us. Put the gun down. So in Normandy, you used to be taxed on your building footprint. So for 100 years, Your building footprint ran your taxes. So people started figuring out how to project over the street to get more square footage on less taxes, until the buildings got so dangerous because they were catching each other on fire, they changed the tax code. In England, you were taxed progressively on the number of windows you had because glass was expensive in England in the 1700s. So people started boarding up their windows to avoid taxes. They changed the tax code. In France, anything below your roof line was considered your building. Anything above was considered your roof. So people stuck stories up there, and they're like, this is clearly the roof, right? Tax code. So these aren't invisible market forces that are making the world get built a certain way. These are policies that you all control and learn about in your administrative program, and realize some of them hurt. Just put the gun down. The last example on this I'll just give you the weirdest one. The reason why I was at that assessors conference, this is a map of dirt value. So you have buildings and you have dirt, right? Buildings and dirt. You can go into the computer and just turn the buildings off and just look at the dirt per acre. This is Cheyenne, Wyoming. You'd expect the world to look like this. Everybody in the neighborhood has the same value per acre. Y'all follow me? And then you see some anomalies over here. This is because assessors don't use GIS for analytics, which is really kind of bizarre. But I like this. I was presenting this at 8 o'clock in the morning in Cheyenne, and I was like, hey, what's going on here where this is $15,000 an acre, and when you cross the street, it goes to $35,000 an acre. It's in the same zoning category. How on the same street, when you cross the street, does land double in value? Does anybody know this? The assessor sat in the front row, and she shot her hand up. And she's like, no, you don't understand. And I was like, try me, what am I missing? She goes, well, they have more land. The more land you have, the lower the value. Does that make any sense to anybody? I'm like, okay, so your city's a finite area. It's a finite commodity. And any finite commodity, where does it world operate economically where the more stuff I get in a finite commodity, is it worth less? Like, does that work for diamonds or gold? And she's like, well, no, that's our standard. Our standard is the more land it is, the lower the value. And I'm like, okay, I've got 3/4 of a mile of infrastructure, 3/4 of a mile, another half mile. I've got 3 miles of roads. This person's got 200 feet. She goes, yeah, it doesn't matter. We don't count that. That's not part of your assessment, your infrastructure investment. I'm like, all right. So I was at the assessors conference because I asked them, I'm like, where did this standard come from? And they thought it was hilarious. They're like, we don't know. And their magazine is called Fair and Equitable. So I asked them, how is this fair or how is this equitable? They're like, it's not. And I'm like, can you change this? They're like, yeah, you need to talk to Larry. I'm like, Larry who? They're like, Larry Clark. So I tracked this guy down. I'm seriously not making this up. I tracked this guy down in the hallway, Larry Clark. I show him this. He's like, yeah, we probably should change that. We've been operating cities since the 1700s off this stupid math, and no one's been asking the question. So to close, I grew up in the 70s with this kind of situation of cities falling apart. These were the headlines. My whole experience of New York City was this. I was petrified to go down there. I didn't make it to New York City until I was 21. But I remember this presentation that Mario Cuomo did when I was a kid. Now, being Italian, I was obligated to listen to him. But he presented this GDP of New York City. And New York City's GDP is about $1.4 trillion of GDP. These are all the countries that have less GDP than New York City. And I remember he pulled a piece of paper off. This was before PowerPoint. And it had all these countries. Now, here I am in Rome, New York, with a permed mullet, watching this, going, wow, I've heard of Sweden. New York City's got more GDP than Sweden? That's amazing. And then he pulls off this other piece of paper, and it's all of the states that have less GDP than New York City. Like Florida? That's a big state. And then he pulls off this final piece of paper, and it was the rest of upstate New York. And it was an amazing lesson to me of understanding the economics of what was going on. I was trained that New York City was this tax burden on the rest of the state, that all of our taxes from upstate New York were going down to that damn evil city. Well, the reality was the opposite. It's the city that was supporting the state. And at a smaller level, the city of Syracuse is supporting all of central New York. And we need to accept that and understand that. The math is there. We need to take this lesson from Mario and put it in play. So Syracuse is $3.4 billion of value, which is more than all of your professional sports teams, or these three, the Yankees, the Bills, and the Sabres. And if we're not measuring things, we can't manage it. We have to do the math on this stuff and figure it out. We have to be literate about tax policy. We're a country that was formed on a tax revolt, for crying out loud. And to not understand that is just, it's lunacy. So put this into play and have this part of the conversation and just do the math. Thank you. Do you want to do questions or the panel? Why don't we do the panel? Okay. Jesse, do you want me in the panel or up here? Yes. Was that? Yes. Okay. No.
Hi. I don't know. Oh, that's on. Hi. I'm Nora Spillane. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood and Business Development, primarily responsible for business development in the city of Syracuse. And so I have the great pleasure to follow Joe. So I'm going to go quickly because I know there's probably a lot of time for Q&A. Thank you, Merica and Professor Lisi, for inviting us here today. Merica asked me to talk primarily about something that we did at the city's industrial development agency, and I thought, oh, this is an audience that's going to have a variety of familiarity with IDAs. So moving through, this is the wrong presentation. So that's on me, and we'll just go back. So we, about 8 months ago, had a task from New York State. We had to revamp a bunch of our policies. IDAs are New York State created agencies. They're incorporated on the local level. They have a variety of powers. We're those people who give away all the monies, except that it's a tax abatement, so there's nothing being given away. It's a future promise. And we have 3 things mainly that an IDA can do. You have a mortgage recording tax that we can abate, a sales tax, so the 8% total, 4% local, 4% state is abated for certain types of projects. And then the elephant in the room is pilots, payment in lieu of tax agreements. So 2 of those 3 are sort of set in stone. This is the hard and fast figure. We don't have a lot of control over that. Here we are, ta-da. The third one is really where IDAs across the state have flexibility to tailor policy to their particular region or municipality. In Syracuse, we had a variety of schedules that people could choose from based on what kind of project they were doing that were sort of reactionary to what was happening in the city at the time. And we decided to kind of flip that on its head. The city obviously has a number of significant problems that were on the presentation I did last week, and to think about what kind of investment we have happening and what kind of investment we want to continue to see encouraged in the city. So I'm going to go through this really fast and we can talk more, but I'm not the exciting one up here. What we did is think about a problem the city has. Obviously, property taxes make up a significant portion of the city's revenue. It's not the entire portion, but it's certainly something we have the ability to control. What do we want to see in the city? Well, we're seeing the resurgence of downtown mixed-use buildings. As Joe said, those are some of our most productive buildings. But we also wanted to encourage the industries that are here and the industries we want to continue to see here grow. So how do we do that? Well, we have to encourage people to invest in areas and parts of the city where maybe they wouldn't be so inclined to do so, or perhaps to do something that they're not inclined to do on their own. So what did we do? We came up with 4 different a menu of options. If you're a project and you're coming and you are creating jobs and you're investing in the city and you qualify on an array of other boring legal grounds, you're going to get our potentially get the standard pilot. 10 years, let's invest in you, let's make sure you know what you're doing and you have some room to grow your business. The second choice on your menu is if you're renovating a historic building. We have a lot of historic buildings in Syracuse, and they are extremely expensive to rehab. But again, a lot of those are in places where the investment in that building pays dividends down the road for the neighborhoods and for the city. So we looked at that and said, tax certainty for 15 years is very exciting for some of these projects and for their financing. So how can we be useful there? So we put together a schedule that says, you have a time to grow into your expenses. So there's 7 years of remaining sort of at a flat assessment and phasing up to the full value of your project. And then we had a conundrum. The city has opted into, and I think successfully, a New York State program called 485A. It's the real property tax law. You do something, you take an old building and you convert it into a mix of residential, you get this sort of by right, if your municipality has opted in, 12-year exemption schedule, which is great and has done wonders, I think, for different parts of the city. It's been a real tool that has been done a huge thing for the city. That said, we have to compete with that to sort of push and pull the policy levers. If a developer is going to take a building, convert it to mixed use, and they can just by right get a sort of very similar type of exemption, well, what is the IDA's additional sort of leverage there? And what we did is two things. We looked at, again, engaging targeted industries in the city that we wanted to continue to encourage to grow. And we also looked at where in the city or what in the city we wanted to make sure we fostered. So there's sort of a either or proposition for that last category. So we have our priority industries, and then we have our priority commercial and residential pilot. And what you can do there is for an added 3 years of tax certainty, an added 3 years of tax benefit, you have a choice. You can invest in a part of the city that's been designated, and my neighborhood colleagues who are in the back there can tell you more about this than I can, that's been designated through a strategic planning process in conjunction with HUD in the neighborhood revitalization strategy areas. These are our hardest hit, sort of most distressed neighborhoods in the city. If you are going to invest in a mixed use project in one of those neighborhoods, you are eligible for this extensive benefit, because that's where we want to continue to encourage the growth. So an example is the Park Ave neighborhood of Syracuse. There's a $20 million renovation of an old lantern factory going on, and because they're in a distressed neighborhood and are investing there, and we think that the long-term benefits of that investment are worth our sort of status quo tax revenue, they were eligible for and received that pilot. The flip side is we also want to encourage sustainable and equitable development. And I guess that's where we get into sort of building wealth here. The flip side is if you're not in one of those neighborhood revitalization strategy areas, what's your option? How are we incentivizing you to do productive development? And what we looked at was part of what makes healthy, vibrant communities is a healthy, vibrant mix of people of income levels, of race, of gender, of the whole spectrum. So we said, if you're not in one of those more distressed neighborhoods, to be eligible for this enhanced benefit, we're going to ask you to put 20% of those residential units available to people at 65% of the area median income, which is, because we're in a weak market in a small town that's not doing so hot all the time, really not a huge disparate number. So if you think about what we hear some of the downtown rents are, $1,200 to $1,400 for a one-bedroom apartment in the Pike Block. 65% rents are just about $900. So 20% of those units at $300 less per month possibly, but with this incentive that we hope makes that math work out to encourage, again, that vibrancy in downtown. So that's my quick look at this, but that's looking at our policy tool and where we really have the most flexibility to tailor that policy to our community and encourage what we like to see going forward. So, quick and dirty.
So my name is Andrew Fish, and as I said, I'm the Senior Vice President of Business and Economic Development for Center State. First, I want to thank Nora for actually not having the PowerPoint, because I didn't bring one, and so I was just going to be shown up by her if hers was really good.
It was.
But what you just heard was really the policy level, right? What Joe was talking to us about in terms of really a strategy to look at your community and make smart investments. And we have these pockets throughout our community, regardless of some of the longer view policy issues of 81 and some of those other challenges. We have neighborhoods, we have communities that have decades of disinvestment, and so you have depressed property values, you have other challenges that come with that. And so really trying to put strategies in place from the city's perspective that can create those investments, create those incentives to do that for the long-term growth of that community is something that's really, really beneficial. I'm going to kind of take you on a little bit of a roller coaster. You know, Joe had the 50,000-foot view. Nora got down into the weeds. I'm going to come back up a little bit and talk a little bit more about regional strategy. And so prior to working for Center State, I've only been there a year. Prior to that, I was with the CUGA Economic Development Agency in the chamber out there. And in that role, I was on the Regional Economic Development Council since its inception in 2011. And the role of the council was really to look at the strategy for our region and say, what does the data tell us? What are the smart ways to make investments? What are the things we need to do to kind of get out of this plateau of not just population stagnation, but economic stagnation, where we've seen, you know, marginal 1%, 2% growth, you know, and some downturn, obviously, when the recession happened, but not any of the you know, accelerated growth opportunities that we'd like to see. And so over that 6 years, over the last 6 years, the Regional Council has really looked at a region-wide strategy, understanding that Syracuse as the hub, as the center for our region is a major driver, but also can create some major drag. And so what are the ways in which we can look at this, knowing that the city doesn't operate within a vacuum, right? So just because the political boundaries are drawn the way they are, the economies are interconnected throughout the whole region and really throughout all of upstate. So we identified 3 overarching goals that we wanted to accomplish in that process. The first was we wanted to strengthen our targeted industry clusters, right? So driving from the standpoint of jobs and looking at what we really did well. And we have a very diverse economy here in central New York. We have no industry that has more than 13% concentration of jobs, you know, in the private sector in central New York. And so that creates a lot of diversity. And so we wanted to embrace that. We wanted to identify ways in which we could support companies that were looking to grow in those industries, and there's about 8 or so industries that we've identified, and not surprising, you'd know many of them. You know, it's environmental systems, biomedical, it's advanced manufacturing, agriculture, financial services, variety of others, and off the top of my head I can't list them all, but you know, it's those areas that you would come to expect by looking around at the major companies and the major employers that we have throughout this region. So we didn't want to just have the standard growth, right? We didn't want them to just look at, okay, how can we, you know, maybe pick up a couple new contracts, grow a little bit here, grow a little bit there. We also wanted to increase their global competitiveness, recognizing that you know, the world truly is flat, and to generate wealth in a community, you have to have outside dollars flowing in. And so increasing the companies around here ability to export, helping them to access those markets on a foreign basis, and really not just outside of the country borders, but even outside of the region, can bring wealth into the region. And so trying to make them more competitive. And that doesn't just mean supports to them, that means infrastructure, right? If you're going to be selling something a long distance from here, you got to get it there. And so it's the transportation infrastructure and those kind of things. And the third one, which you know, is really pertinent to today's conversation, is revitalizing our urban cores and our main streets. We recognize that this data is out there, that this is the reality, that if you can create density and you can create an area where you're creating more value per acre, more economic activity per acre, we wanted to see that happen. And going back to the third grade lesson plan, right? And so you have your cities, you have your suburbs, and you have your rural communities. We have a lot of that in central New York, where we've got these little pockets of villages and cities, you know, Skaneateles and cities of Auburn and Syracuse and Oswego. How can we create revitalization in those communities to undo some of the ill effects that we're still feeling, you know, 45, 50 years later from urban renewal, to recreate that density? But we also recognize that for employers to create jobs and for them to be more globally competitive, they have to have a really dynamic workforce. And in order to do that, you have to have people who are proud of where they live and feel safe in where they are and go home and feel good about themselves and then go to work and be productive at work. And if they're having challenges in their home environment or in their community, or if they're just driving past, you know, buildings that are falling apart and they don't have a sense of pride at place, they're not going to have as much you know, desire to stay or attract quality workforce into the community. And so that's also a part of that, revitalizing those urban cores. And so we've kind of recognized that these strategies are all interconnected, right? The nature of this was we really wanted to see projects that actually touched on all three of those goals. We wanted to see targeted industries that were becoming more globally competitive, that were making investments in our urban cores and downtowns and main streets. You know, as a region, we've been very clear, look, this isn't just about trying to, you know, we're not asking everyone to roll up their sleeves and focus on the problems of the city of Syracuse. You know, this is about the whole region. This is about Madison County. This is about Oswego County. This is about Cortland. This is about Cayuga and all those things in between. And for the city to be really vibrant and successful and have that density of retail and business, you still have to have rural communities that support that in your agricultural operations. You still have certain types of companies that you just don't want in the middle of your downtown, right? And so as that continues to grow and we see opportunities increase, we're going to feel that throughout the entire region. And we've seen that. So the Central New York Regional Council has been extremely successful in the way the state has been doing economic development. I could give you a whole description of what that is, but essentially it's been the most successful region of the 10 in New York State, and we've seen over $844 million of state resources that have flown to flowed to the region from state agencies in incentivizing projects. We've seen significant job growth from that. Unfortunately, we're still in an area that's kind of plateaued, and so a lot of that growth has been kind of your churn and burn, right? So it's new jobs that are coming in as we've lost some others and lost some other opportunities. And so we need to continue to make smart investments, and we need to continue to look at this from a very strategic standpoint. So you know, it's been a great process to be a part of. The Upstate Revitalization Initiative is the last thing I want to talk about here quick. That just came along 2 years ago, which was a $500 million competition, 3 regions to receive $500 million in state resources. We were kind of asked to reassess the strategy that we had as a region and identify a couple of key industry clusters that we felt like had kind of more of the hockey stick growth opportunity, right? Instead of just supporting our standard industry clusters, where were the things that we felt like we could see some significant growth? And the 2 major industries that came out of that is the unmanned aerial systems, the drone industry. Many of you have probably seen a lot of that in the news lately, a lot of conversations. We're going to be investing in the first fully instrumented unmanned aerial systems traffic management corridor between Rome, Griffiths Air Park, and Syracuse Hancock International, where companies can come and do commercial test flights of their drone operations and do that with the FAA to try and enable what the next iteration is for beyond visual line of sight. So right now, if you are trying to do something commercially with a drone, you have a pilot, you have a unit, and you're basically watching it, and you have to be within line of sight of that. And so really that marketplace is going to open up when you can have one pilot, multiple vehicles, and beyond visual line of sight. And so, you know, we expect that that's probably a 4 or 5 year out solution. It's not something that's going to take, you know, tens of years or so. And then the second industry was agriculture, and not just your traditional commodity-based growing, but because of the agrarian economy that we have in Central New York, we wanted to, again, go more yield per acre and look at controlled environment ag operations, so greenhouse operations, where you can extend the shoulder seasons of growing and increase the yield per acre. In addition to that, we didn't want to just do that to serve a local market. We wanted to think about how do we grow products and actually serve a more global market, and so we're looking at extended shelf life packaging, aseptic packaging. Operations, so coming in with either dairy or produce things where you can package it in such a way that it can show up, you know, halfway around the world and still be a fresh product for them to consume. So those strategies we think have a real high potential for Central New York, and we expect that through keeping, and we didn't move away from our original 3 goals. All of the things that we looked at in the Upstate Revitalization Initiative speak to those original 3 goals. The most important thing in the URI that really underpinned the whole thing was our recognition of the fact that we have a real issue with concentrated poverty and economic inclusion as it relates to the growth we have experienced and the challenges that we've been seeing in Central New York, the nature of some of those disinvestments in our downtown communities, the nature of some of the isolation that's happened in some of those neighborhoods really creates a ton of barriers, both physical and environmental, circumstantial, for people to access the economy. So even if we're growing those jobs, we're having a difficult time connecting major portions of our population to those opportunities. And so there was a major initiative in the URI that basically said, all of this growth has to meet this issue. All of this growth has to have a focus on and a goal of addressing this issue, or else it doesn't matter. We can have that hockey stick growth in those industries, and we'll be importing, a workforce from outside of the area and continue with our sprawl and not densifying our communities and not having the real change that needs to happen in some of our not only urban poverty areas, but also our rural poverty areas. And so that's the really the thrust behind the URI, is that inclusive growth with some high upside.
Right, so at that, we've got some microphones. If you've got questions, please raise your hand.
No questions from you.
Ask him a question. You can't ask a question.
Hello, okay. Me and my classmate here, we're actually working on a project right now looking at economic development in Syracuse and also the county, mainly concerning the idea of the new consensus report and the 2 different IDAs, the county IDA and the city IDA. And we've been looking into some of the conflicts that have been happening between the 2 over the past couple years or so. And I was just wondering if you could give us a little more insight into how that's been for you, working for the IDA in the city, and how you would feel about merging those 2 IDAs, if you think that's a good idea or not.
So we're lucky to have my counterpart at the county IDA also in the audience, and I worked for the county's economic development office for several years, so I think I'm going to maybe answer but not answer your question directly. What I have learned working for both IDAs is that they have very overlapping abilities, but have done very different work. The county IDA has been primarily focused for its history on the industries outside the city, and that's sort of where it found its niche and its strength. Since coming to the city IDA has focused lately more on sort of the revitalization aspects of some of these things. And they each have done well in their spaces. And I think no matter what happens, there's a fundamental sort of push-pull of how IDAs can use their statutory authority in urban areas versus how they can use their statutory authority in more sort of in the industrial base of the region they cover. There's a lot of minutia and legal stuff to get into the weeds on that, but fundamentally, we're pushing and pulling the same levers, just in different ways for different purposes. Beyond that,
I can add a little color to that too, if you'd like. So in my previous job working in Cayuga County, Cayuga has a county and a city IDA as well. And so, there are a lot of, if you're studying this, obviously, there's a lot of legislation around the IDAs and a lot of things that are required of what they do and how they do them and how their boards are populated and all those things. And there's even systems that are set up for if they want to, consolidate or go away, and some have done it successfully and others have done it through support services agreement. That's what happened in Cayuga. The city and the county IDA still exist, but they're all staffed by a common entity right now. What I will say is that the real key is just coordination and making sure that they're on the same page. And how you do that is by having a strategy for your community, and I'm saying that community in a broad standpoint that everyone embraces, right? And so, as Nora said, the resources and the tools that the industrial development agencies have are pretty uniform. It's how they apply those, and if you're following a strategy that is consistent throughout the whole community, you're going to find ways to be most successful in doing that.
I'm going to take a step into more color because I'm not from here. So what I see with most communities where you have this kind of setup is you're essentially setting up an adversarial relationship between the city and the county, and it's unnecessary. And the county ends up shooting the city in the foot, which the city is its prime driver. As you saw, the city of Syracuse is producing 17% of the county's property taxes. So that begs the question, does the city of Syracuse receive a commensurate investment of 17% of the budget back into the city? So let's be honest, that this is the most productive part of Onondaga County, and the county's feasting on it. You know, so rather than penalize the city, be cooperative and invest where you're getting the biggest return on investment. So you shouldn't be doing office parks at the edge of the city. Those offices should be coming into the downtown, where those, unless you're doing nuclear fission or something, where you need to be separated from places. But most of these eds and meds jobs, and you know, what the hell? While I'm at it, Syracuse, for crying out loud, the university. Like, is there some sort of like Trumpian wall around you that you can't walk across into the downtown? And how do you take down your barriers as well? Is that these are all shared economic systems, and they should be building on top of each other rather than competing against each other.
Hi. Hi. Yes. I have a question that comes from Joseph's presentation. Okay, so you make the point. It's obviously, the data shows it's much more profitable to have these dense buildings and investments. But I was thinking of the failed projects. I mean, my idea from looking at your presentation is, okay, so let's build vertically and let's make these mixed projects, no? But what are the other factors that will enable that project to have a life, right? Because I don't think that I can go to any place and just build a building like that and make it work, no? So maybe you could talk a little bit about what other factors of the environment, no, and of the city as an organic space can make those type of projects work or not, no?
Well, you know, I think the thing that, you know, I've heard a lot of positive comments about these are the proactive things that we're doing as a community to seed new investment. But commensurate with this, you all need to do some basic kitchen table economics about where you're spending your money already and where you're inefficient. You know, it's like, well, it's great that you're having a proactive introduction into the downtown of new buildings and trying to take those barriers down. But what about all of out Erie Canal or Erie Boulevard, where you have mile after mile after mile after mile of unproductive building, where you have the cost of the infrastructure far surpasses the taxes paid by those properties? You know, where are you wasting your money? Here, in Clay, wherever, inside the county, where are you hemorrhaging your money that you have to basically remove barriers for somebody who's trying to help you? And we're taking these people through a process of our Byzantine policies and laws of trying to help them through that process. Yet at the same time, I get these get-out-of-jail-free cards for doing the things that actually harm you. And I think as long as we have that conversation about the totality of this stuff, it's not organic, it's not just happening. These are policies. And a lot of times I find with cities is that, well, you know, there's one of my peers, his name is Chuck Marone, and he does a presentation on old cities. I mean, think about Syracuse, the original Syracuse that was here. Was Maxwell like making that happen? Did they have a bunch of people with MPAs, an entire city planning department, a big thick zoning code when you made the original Syracuse? No. These are a bunch of canal workers that built a manufacturing city, and they built a city that still has wealth in it. And so don't overthink this. You don't need more policies. You don't need more acronyms of this policy versus that policy or this special way in. Look at your policies and figure out maybe these are too much. You know, maybe we've created this Byzantium that's actually causing a problem here, that you don't need to come up with more ways and bandages on top of an already screwed up apparatus.
Hi, Joe. Dave Mankiewicz. And I appreciate what you said, but I think he was absolutely right. And I want to punch at that a little bit more, because the thing in your presentation, and I'm a big fan, but what unnerves me is when you just look at things from a standpoint of taxable generation per acre, because that brings a certain prejudice to it. So when we looked at that picture that Nora had up before of all the tall buildings that are in downtown, those generate, you're absolutely right, the highest taxable value per acre. But within that downtown, those small 2- and 3-story buildings create the interest. They generate a different kind of value. They're not generating as much per acre, but they're generating interest. When America takes you out to dinner tonight, you're not going to any one of those tall buildings, because I'll tell you, they're boring as hell. You're going to go to Armory Square, which is a great place, but it's not generating the highest taxable value per acre, but it's what generates the attraction and interest in downtown. I've never been to Asheville, North Carolina, but I believe if I walked into it and you showed me a map of where the small, dense buildings are, that's probably the most interesting part of Asheville. And the big office buildings would probably be, okay, we wouldn't spend a lot of time looking at them. I'm just saying that there are other things that build a community. The building we're sitting in is generating $0 per acre in terms of tax value. But if you take Syracuse University out of the city of Syracuse, you got Utica, you got Rome, okay? You can't just measure it by that. The Syracuse University and its fellow not-for-profits contribute an immense amount of value to the city. It drives their economy.
Well, I can answer this question.
So that's, I just
yeah.
want to, I think he was hitting
No,
on that point.
Well, it's good they let the hippie in the room. You know, I get this in places. I was in Sonoma County, California, and one of the guys in the audience said to me, he goes, "But can you measure the soul of the place?" And it's like, well, possibly. I think my soul's better than yours, so we'll start there as me as the baseline. You know, I'm joking. You know, there are these kind of intangibles, but there's things at a brass tacks level. I mean, Jesse had to go on a sabbatical to find me a coffee. You know, there's thousands of people in and around this building, and you can't find a coffee. You know, there are things that just, as hairless apes, we live in a certain way, and the institution of the university is not sacrosanct. It can actually have other uses in and around that. You know, and so why have the membrane around this thing as if it's an isolated organism? So this place functions the same way. Why aren't there student housing or teachers housing for professors on the campus? You know, it's like, why not do that public-private development like our parking garage? It's not like it's undoable. At Harvard University they do that. When you walk into Harvard Yard, that is monolithically owned, or the Harvard Square, should I say, is monolithically owned by the university. All of those buildings. They just chose to actually become a real estate developer because they're older than the United States and they wanted to control their own destiny. So, but you don't feel a membrane at the edge of the university. It doesn't just stop. It just bleeds into Cambridge. So this is something that could happen between the university and downtown. Now, you do have a physical barrier. But, you know, back to the point of you're hemorrhaging money. You're hemorrhaging lots of money to make it simple. You know, people tell me, they're like, well, I don't want to live in downtown. Well, great. But why not provide the opportunity for more, or why aren't you accounting for that cost to have that lifestyle that you want, to have that 10-acre plot out in the next county over and drive all the way? And there is a true cost to that. My dad used to work about 3 miles or 2 miles from here on the other side of downtown. What's the cost of somebody driving from Rome all the way over to here, and then his car gets more space than he does? That's the cost you're bearing on my dad who lives in Rome and drove all the way over here. So just run the nut on that. Is it worth it for you to do that? What's the trade-off? You know, could you have a better investment of money? And that's all I'm saying. It's like, yeah, you have the university, but are you maximizing that opportunity? How many kids do you harvest that come through here, get an education, and stay in this community? Because you're actually importing intellectual capital that other cities don't have. So I would measure that. How many university students actually stay in Syracuse? Are you actually capturing that?
But I think if I could just...
And by the way, the white building was one that I showed. That was a 4-story building. That's one that was built in 1886.
No, I understand that. But if I took you for what you said, that things rise geometrically with height in terms of tax generation.
Stop at 3 stories. I don't care.
But that's the point. Because right now, the city is debating, in terms of their zoning, whether to put an unlimited height limit in the space of downtown. And I said to them, don't do that, because you're going to send a clear signal to the development community to go in and rip down Armory Square, Hanover Square, Clinton Square. You don't want to do that. You want to keep those height limits limited,
Well,
and make sure that those places that are special, historic, the white one, they're preserved.
Yeah.
You don't want to send them the wrong signal.
well, I'd go with that, but I'd also say, okay, well, that's the top end. That's the carrot. Where's your stick? You know, can I still sit in your downtown and hold a surface lot and just get taxed at that use? Or are you charging me the commensurate investment that you've put in the community, so I'm at least covering my nut? Are you taking advantage? Are you taking care of the land speculation that's pervasive in this community? And that's, you don't just go and, unlimited building height, that's just rewarding the speculator because you're putting more zoning capacity on the property. It's a zoning game. It's a financial situation. You're going to give an incredible incentive to a developer, but you're also going to reward these people that are bleeding you dry.
And just as a sort of point of fact, the the city is undergoing a comprehensive citywide rezone, which is what Dave is referring to, which does have it is sort of upzoning a lot of areas of the city, but it's not in a vacuum. So Armory Square, Hanover Square, the sort of jewels of our downtown and of most of the neighborhoods in the city are protected in other ways. And I would be surprised if you saw surface parking allowed in the central business district this time next year as an allowed use. So there are, there's a lot of different policies that we as a municipality get to, leverage together. Just some context for that. Yes, maybe we shouldn't have an unlimited height restriction. I don't think we'll end up with an unlimited height restriction, but it's not just build all your buildings and knock everything else down. There's protections built in there for those 2- and 3-story buildings, which do make up the character of downtown and frankly the character of some of our neighborhoods where we really want to see the same kind of reinvestment that downtown has seen in those sort of shorter buildings encouraged throughout the city.
By the way, Asheville had unlimited building height up until 2010. It wasn't the end of the world. It's just, we also had a lot of building stock. What we did do is we got rid of parking requirements. There is no parking requirements in downtown Asheville, none.
Sacrilege.
Yeah, and somehow the world didn't end, but the city was also proactively involved in parking. Now the city somehow developed amnesia in the last 4 years and forgot how to build a parking garage, and now we all of a sudden have a parking problem. Go figure. So it's a cooperative social corporation. It's not just the public sector or the private sector. It is cooperative, and the public sector needs to understand how to build buildings. There's a frustration as a developer that I have, and apologies to, and due respect to my peers to my left. I build buildings. Well, I've also worked in government. The frustration that most developers have when they go and introduce themselves into government is that these are the figure skating judges to my left, and they've never laced up a pair of skates. And I'm over here doing a double sow cow or whatever, and they're like, 10, 4. I'm like, you never skated before. So I think...
That's why I started a development company.
Yeah. So, well, it's just, and I mean this in all due respect, but I'm joking. It's like, we do need people that work inside government that understand the building process, and that this isn't all some nefarious plot to destroy a community. We also need to hold developers accountable to when they build a pile of junk, we should tell them it is. And we should have an honest conversation about it. We were driving through Armory Square last night, and there's one side that's really nice. You've got these storefronts on the ground floor, and somehow that learning didn't translate to the other side of the square, and you have office uses on the ground floor. That was absolutely dumb. You know, and I could totally tell from the developer's perspective. I've got a Class A tenant, Farmers Insurance. Well, do y'all go walking in for looking for insurance on a daily basis? Like, what's up with that? So Syracuse could learn from its past and say, okay, it's really simple. Retail uses at the ground floor, start in a certain area, design guidelines, make it simple.
I'm Don Radke. I'm representing the Greater Syracuse Association of Realtors, and I'd like to talk about a different kind of wealth, going along with what Dave was saying, but a little different kind of wealth. And get out of downtown and get into our neighborhoods. I think one of the worst kept, or one of the best kept secrets, unfortunately, right now is within the city limits, we have a housing boom that's unbelievable. Outside of downtown, we don't have inventory. The inventory we have is inferior. It's not been subject to code enforcement in any consistent way. And yet there's tons and tons of as-built wealth sitting in our neighborhoods that's run down or going to be run down that could be a tremendous source of wealth for a homeowner at some point in the future. And we talk about a lot of the planning that we're doing, and I just think there's been a consistent lack of planning about the single-family residential house and residential revitalization and wealth building that can bring into our community. And again, couple that with the fact that, you know, the stars are aligned right now, and we have a tremendous opportunity of buyers wanting to move into the city, into a single-family home. And it's a special lifestyle that makes Syracuse as good as it is, and yet we're not expanding that, which then can bring the people back in rather than continue the sprawl.
Well, I would challenge that because it is sprawl. You know, single-family detached housing is more consumptive of services than what it pays in taxes.
I agree, but respectfully, I'm talking about things that are here. I'm not talking about new building. I'm talking about things that are here that create neighborhoods.
Is it infill or is it at the edge?
No,
yeah, so the further you go out, the more expensive it becomes.
It depends where you go. It's a real hodgepodge around this. But I'm talking about as-built properties here that aren't getting the benefits of a good code enforcement, so they're deteriorating. I'm talking,
sure.
You know, I'm not talking about infill, and I'm not talking, that's a different story, and I'm not talking about new projects. I'm talking about what we already have that is an asset, that does have wealth, that I'm telling you can truly be something that can be worked around, but we've got to find a way to make it plausible for somebody on a lower income, let's just take that group, or a senior on a not big income to move into some of these structures, allow zoning to create some opportunities, and keep some of these structures that are here rather than having them torn down and creating infill.
Well, I think at a larger market perspective, you know, and we saw that. Well, you see this with the South Bend example, that they're still building at the edge and the periphery. And this is a community that's not adding more revenue in a larger scale, and you're actually making more cost. So what happens at a city level is all of a sudden you've got to make serious choices. Do we pave a road or do we hire a code enforcement officer? You know, or worse, you get these institutions inside government that actually have lobbying force, like the police department or the fire department, where all of a sudden the fire department wants to have a new toy and they want to buy a $1.5 million truck so they can get a new truck, and they can lobby the government where the planning department can't. You know, it's like these are choices that end up happening, and all of a sudden you can't afford that code enforcement officer, which causes a decay. You know, I think that there is a totality of looking at this beyond the marketplace of a single-family residential unit to see these larger dysfunctions that are baked into the system, and you feel it more when you start to lose population.
And the city does have and you guys probably know the number off the top of your head, so I'm not going to call you out, but remind me. The city does have an overabundance of housing units, and some of them are not in great shape, and some of them are in neighborhoods that aren't desirable, and those are the facts that, as a municipality, we try to deal with. You know, the school district is obviously a big factor, but code enforcement is a huge part of it, something I didn't really anticipate spending a lot of my time on a year ago when I took this job. But it is a huge factor, and looking at ways to be more efficient with our code enforcement, using data to prioritize where we send our code enforcement officers and how we send them out. And then really the process of code enforcement is probably changing in the next 6 to 8 months. You know, I'm not like letting the cat out of the bag. It's going through the Common Council and the New York State Legislature that, you know, like you get a parking ticket and you have to go deal with it. You can get a house ticket in a couple of months that you have to deal with, so that we're not taking limited finite municipal resources in people and having them go to court and try to execute judgments against absentee landlords, but, you know, flipping that on its head to be a little bit more proactive in some of those ways.
Buffalo did this really cool program, and I don't know why they gave up on it, but they got aggressive with closing in on people that were in tax default, basically. And they offered the houses for like $1 to recent graduates, but they had to stay in the community for 10 years with that. But it basically gave the students, recent graduates, an asset in the community that they could build wealth and keep them at home. So it was, I mean, who wouldn't want a house for $1? And then, you know, when you're in your 20s, you're stupid enough to put all of your time into your fixing your house and doing all of that stuff, which is great. It's really exciting. But they build a shared interest in the community.
Thanks. My name is Bob Haley. I'm an architect and a planner, and I have taught here before, but that's not the point. I'd like to speak, first of all, I appreciate the differences you all represent on the panel. Joe, from your point of view, we in Syracuse have a big difference between city and county in terms of management, you know, from the IDAs to planning to perception about investment. I think Don's question, we're both on the Landmark Preservation Board for the Syracuse, but we're both for growth as well and new buildings. The towns and villages around here have a very different attitude about densification. And one of the biggest problems we're having with this 5-year study, 6-year study of the I-81 project and the future of where Syracuse is going is trying to understand land values where dynamics like $3 billion or $2 to $3 billion worth of investment in our infrastructure can benefit everyone in the region. One of the most difficult things we have about our region is how different the towns and villages are for new business growth and looking at our city for the regional growth as an answer to their problem. I'm very distressed by such towns as the town of Salina not looking at land value and densification as a growth model for their economy for 50 years, and in fact are just holding back in a very kind of just don't want to change point of view. On business, one of the things Don was asking about, I'm sorry, I'm going to ramble here. He's talking about our infrastructure in the city that we have for a 200-year-old city, which is housing stock that is of tremendous value. It's embedded energy from a sustainability point of view for potential homes. That's a business. In terms of job growth for the URI, the biggest shortcoming of the URI, in my view, is that it didn't focus more on the poor and the poverty and the schools. They can do that by putting new businesses in place to take care of those houses, the carpentry jobs, the training jobs that we need across the board, as opposed to the 1 or 2 big industries that we all want. You know what I mean there, the different point of view about how you go for business development. Could you respond to those? Thank you.
What was the question?
Sorry. Well, how do you take care of a regional basis where the city and the townships really don't share the same value on growth of land?
So what you have is, I mean, they're competitive corporations, so you're going to get, you know, it's in Salina's best interest to steal your population, you know, and sell houses out there and build their tax base. But so long as you're accounting for that trade-off, and I would be public about it and say, all right, well, you're fleecing of our housing stock because there's schools being built out there that are you're putting more regional investment into those schools and nothing's coming back in a Syracuse with a commensurate level that you're putting into these other school systems. That's a regional conversation that should happen at the county level. If you ever want to have fun, come down south. My state legislator, and I was on our downtown board at the time, our state legislator called us a cesspool of sin. And, you know, we did the polite Southern thing. We're like, well, maybe he didn't really mean it. And so we sent a reporter to go talk to him to give him his out. He doubled down. And his second comment was, that downtown part's where all the freaks and weirdos are and all them queers. That's the cesspool of sin. And so what do? We threw a street party. You know, we like had beer in the street. We all wore flip-flops and water wings and joked about the cesspool. Make T-shirts that say, welcome to the cesspool. You know, the dynamic of the city and the county, the country and the rural, it's not new to you people. You know, every community deals with that, and that's part of the reason why I showed that regional book. What's happened is we've gotten into this delusion that the suburban landscape is America. And what we don't account for is the subsidy that we put into that system. So let's go ahead and account for that and put it out there and say, here's the subsidy that you're getting to live in Salina, that you're getting to live in Fayetteville and Clay. This is the subsidy that's going to you. We want to make sure that regionally we're having the conversation about this, and we're going to call it a subsidy because there wasn't some public vote about how to do, what was it, 340 through here? And shovel that wealth into the ground to drain Syracuse. And let's account for what Syracuse is giving up in productive real estate so that the region can have their housing out there. And let's account for it. You know, is it worth the trade-off? You know, it's not, it's like, oh, we're going to subsidize to do infill into a neighborhood so that there's equity here. Well, let's be equitable about what the transference is that's out there, too. And that's the thing I don't see a lot of communities do, and that's one of the reasons why we do all of our maps at a county-wide level. And just in defense of the county, show of hands, who's attended a county commission meeting, or what do you call them, councils here? Legislature. Who's attended a county legislative session in the last year? You know, what, 5 hands? So if we're all county participants and we're not showing up at that county meeting, and those people out there are, well, where do you think the county legislators are going to make their choices? They're going to listen to their people. So it's on us to actually take part of those as well if we're paying those taxes.
Speaking real quick to your URI question, we agree with you. It didn't go far enough. I mean, part of the challenge was we were charged from the state to say where are those two major, you know, actually their challenge was find a major growth industry, and we pushed back and said it's not just about the growth industry. There's also barriers that we need to address, and so on and so forth. So part of the challenge is most of the industries that have that hockey stick growth have a high barrier for entry. Right, you're not talking about entry-level work in most of those industries that have, you know, they're high tech, they're advanced technologies, they're things that are going to not necessarily have that. Ag's a little different. There is some entry-level work that can be associated with that. What we've done is we've backed that up and said, you know, there are real hard dollars that are available in the URI to go towards programs that can help people access workforce opportunities. And then in this regular consolidated funding application process, the regular RADC, the council is actively having conversations right now about bringing higher levels of priority to projects that submit that are located in specific geographic areas that need that extra assistance. And so we felt like we pushed and pushed and pushed and got it as far as we could in the original plan, and we're continuing to try and find ways to move that needle.
Thank you. Your response.
Hi, everybody. My question is regarding assumptions that community members have at at developer meetings. For example, I'm from Chicago, and I've been at some really nasty where developers come to propose a project and the community just reacts really hostile. I don't know anything about being a developer. When I think of that word, I think of Donald Trump. So I was hoping if you could give, any of you guys could give us experience about what questions the community should be asking and what assumptions we should not be having as we're listening to pitches. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's kind of funny. I could show you some cartoons that we were put into our when we did that mixed-use public-private development. Okay. We were actually designing a building adjacent to that site. We kept on getting asked by hotel developers to buy our property. We had an acre of land. And they were mostly like luxury hotels. And we're just like, no, please go away. And then finally, a Loft came in, which is kind of a lower price point hotel. And we own a nightclub on that block. So we figured, well, if people are driving in to come to our club, giving them a place to they just walk up the street that was kind of reasonably priced was actually pretty cool. We can work with them. So in the city's downtown master plan, there was a star on our piece of land, and it said, build a joint venture public-private parking deck. So we reached out to the city. One of my friends who's a city planner said to me, now the city, they said they were working with us. We felt that they were fighting us on this public-private venture. One of my friends who's a planner said to me, Joe, that moved right along. It took 4 years to get the contract signed. And I was like, Sasha, Do you know how many human beings my wife and I can produce in 4 years? 5. We could make 5 people. That was just to sign the contract. Then we had to go through this construction documents, the construction period. 4 years is not fast in our world. We were dragged through the newspaper as a scumbag developer. We had like one of the politicians on a string, and we're like some kind of boss hog guy with a big cigar in his mouth. I don't dress like this in Asheville. You know, the president of our company makes $60,000 a year. You know, it's just, but we're scumbag developers. And I would sit there with friends at cocktail parties. As soon as I told them I was a developer, at beer parties, I should say, it's Asheville. As soon as I told them I was a developer, they're like, scumbag. And I was like, I'm sorry, do you live in a bush? Like, somebody built your friggin' house. You know, it's like, for God's sakes, we've kind of allowed that public conversation that all developers are evil. Now, I'm not going to say all developers are great. There's some developers that do some awful things and make lots of money doing the wrong thing. When we allow somebody to come in and put up a strip mall, and they do the most minimal investment in their community, they get all of this public infrastructure and don't pay taxes out of it, yeah, these people make gobs of money. It's somehow become normal inside the real estate development world that you can get a 25% return on investment in 5 years. Like, what other marketplace operates with this assumption that you have a right to 25% return on investment? Let's talk about that. You know, and that needs to be part of the conversation, is what's fair inside the development. There will be developers that'll be okay with 10%, 12%, but developers still have to make money. It's a business. You know, I can't open a tofu restaurant and then just have you in the community float my rent. You know, it's like, I'm no rock star with tofu. It's got to sell. You know, people have to buy it.
I think, just to emphasize a little bit, no matter what project is going to come forward, you're going to have detractors, and a lot of that's going to come from the NIMBY mentality, right? Not in my backyard. And so I think the right questions to ask are just what you've been hearing all day. What's the numbers, right? What's the data? What are you actually providing this community, and what are you getting in return for that? You know, I running the IDAs in Cayuga County, there wasn't a single pilot that I put in front of that board that they approved that we couldn't sit there and look at the cost-benefit analysis and say with absolute certainty, this community is benefiting more in the long run by this project moving forward than if this project didn't move forward. And this developer or this company is not getting undue benefit, and this, you know, and they're not getting something that is unreasonable for what we're trying to accomplish here and the jobs they're going to create and the dollars that they're going to invest. And I think, you know, as a community person, when you show up, you know, try and put the NIMBY stuff to the side and try and get that big picture, because, you know, it goes back to some of the challenges that, you know, he faced from the legislators. He didn't even finish with bless their heart. I mean, that doesn't, that's not okay. But, you know, it goes back to some of that where people are going to bring their own misconceptions to the table, and so, or their own preconceived notions. And so it's if you can set those things aside and really look at the facts and the figures associated with that project, those are what those determinations should be made on.
And I'll just say that, you know, from a municipal perspective, that you can't just look at something and just look at the building plans and say, oh, it's a type C building that's going to have this kind of occupancy, and look at it that way. It's just not that simple. So taking another level down and saying, what is this in the context of its neighborhood? What is this in the context of what it's doing regionally? I think we often get NIMBY'd because we're looking at a very narrow set of facts. And one of the things, you know, we're compelled to do statutorily at the IDA, but generally I think from a wise sort of investment strategy is, what are the other intangible benefits? Not just the jobs, but what kind of jobs? Not just where, but how are people getting there? Who's being hired to build it? Who's being hired to work there? You know, literally we're statutorily compelled to ask that, but it's also good policy practice. So I can put on my MPA hat and say, I've run a lot of cost benefits on projects downtown, and I can tell you what we anticipate and how we monitor that and how that goes forward, that sometimes gets lost in the, you know, the flashy dollar signs of what you're giving away. But it's that next level down that I think from a municipal standpoint, we have answers to those questions, but they have to be asked.
And one more thing to pile on with this is, for the students in the room, as you go off into your careers in public administration, the most important picture in my entire presentation was my mother. She has a high school education. I would go off and learn all this stuff and come home and nerd out on my poor mother. I would take her in the car and drive her out into the suburbs of Rome that they were building in Rome, even though Rome was hemorrhaging their population. And I would just harass my mom about these housing units. And my poor mother would sit there and I'm like, why do you like this? And I would explain it to her. What I started to learn is that my mom's not stupid. You know, she may not have a degree or any of that, but she's a smart woman, but she's incredibly busy. And she wants to do the right thing, but no one ever approached her with information. And I would always pile on all of this, look how smart I am. Well, that never reached my mom. She would just ask me, what do you want for dinner? And like, that's where we'd go, you know? And so if you can't make this stuff from a communication standpoint simple, y'all just sat through 198 slides on taxation and city development. Did it feel like 198 slides? You know, it's a story. You want to communicate to people. You want to design the information in a way that people can understand it quickly. Now, I use pictures because our eyes can absorb a lot of information quickly. But if you're gonna start to break down these barriers in the conversation, you have to put the information out there in a digestible way. If people don't understand it, they resort to the NIMBY tactics because they just tune out when you get this alphabet soup of policies and bureaucracies and names. They're not in that world. You know, they're busy. They've got a shoe shop or they work at a coffee store or whatever. And all of this stuff, if they can't trust it or access it, they fight it.
We are at time. We have a room set aside in 341 Eggers, right upstairs. So if you want to continue the conversation, we've got some snacks available if you'd like to come. But we very much like to thank our guests from out of town and our local representatives for the conversation today. So.